the lane. 15-10. Touchdown, Chargers. All right, here we go, guys. We are 1 week away from the 2023 NFL Draft. Welcome into a brand new episode of Chargers Weekly. As always, joined by Matt Money Smith. And Money, I neglected to talk about this last week, and I was kicking myself. I got the video late. Did you see our producer, Greg Kim, catching footballs from the Judges?
I did. I thought he did pretty damn well.
I thought he did very well. And, you know, we talk about wide receiver. I think Greg Kim at least is worth a spot in the summertime. And Greg, I saw you also catching punts, and with the absence of DeAndre Carter, I don't know if you want to get on the mic and just talk about that experience, Greg, if you're still there. What was that like catching a Justin Herbert football? It's not recording your audio. Okay, well, that's a shame.
Look at that. That's back-to-back. You blew it, Chris. You blew it last week by not bringing it up, and you blew it this week by trying to bring Greg in when he can't come on. Way to go. Some host you are.
It's worse now because I set him up. I asked him a question. He can't even talk. Anyway, it was awesome, and I really appreciated your effort, Greg. I saw you wearing the helmet and everything. It was pretty cool. But
that was fun when they said, all right, let's go up to Justin Herbert mode. It's like you think you're doing pretty well
Good luck.
on the machine, and then all of a sudden they're like, okay, now let's show you what it's like when it's Justin Herbert time when you start getting peppered.
They edited all your catches?
That's exactly what happened, Greg. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
Check it out. It's on Chargers.com. It is great, but I thought Greg did a bang-up job. That is also not easy.
Catching the punts, too. Like, I think you did one of those things where you caught one, and then you had the ball in your hand, you caught another one, and again, dude, there's an opening at that position. So, Greg, shout out to you.
Yep. Well done.
The offseason program, phase one is here. We got to hear from Brandon Staley, and he was very specific. 93 days since our last game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I want to kind of talk about a few things that he spoke about, but I think we have to start with Jalen Hurts in that monster contract that he got, $255 million, I think 179 guaranteed. We were waiting to see which quarterback was going to be the first domino to fall. Obviously, there's Burrow, there's Lamar, and there's Justin still to go. But the guy who gets to the Super Bowl and probably would have been the Super Bowl MVP, or definitely would have been the Super Bowl MVP had the Eagles won, he's the first domino to fall.
Well, look, I can't say it enough. I've said it already. I try, and it takes two. It's two parties. It's not a unilateral negotiation, right? So get this thing done. The sooner you get it done, the less money it's going to cost you. Because I can tell you right now, Herbert's camp ain't taking a cent less than what Jalen Hurts got. Even though he's a runner-up MVP, took his team to the Super Bowl, I can promise you that camp is saying, I get it. His accomplishments are higher and there are more than Justin has. However, go on out and poll 32 GMs in this league, and you tell me if any of them want to take Jalen Hurts over Justin Herbert. And I'm not taking anything away from Jalen. He is an incredible quarterback. And incredible. I would absolutely
earned every cent.
And look, I have no problem coming clean on this because I've said it. I've already been made a fool. Annually, I get made a fool for my take on Patrick Mahomes when he was drafted by the Chiefs because we had never seen anyone come out of Texas Tech and the way he played football in college. And I said it with Justin Herbert. We just did not see this Justin Herbert at Oregon. So it was a much tougher and a little bit more of a critical evaluation. And going into that draft, when Tua got selected at 5, I was like, we were on the air at the time doing the radio show. I said, I got no problem taking Isaiah Simmons here and scooping up Jalen Hurts in the second. And I think that was a very, I don't want to say common, because if it was so common, a team would have taken him in the first. But it was a very popular position that people, they knew that Jalen had to grow as a quarterback, as a thrower, but anybody that had ever been around that guy was like, man, you will not find a better leader, a more competitive individual, someone who absolutely is relentless in the way he attacks his craft. And that plays, that works. And I think it's one of the things about Justin Herbert that the Chargers absolutely love is how committed this dude is and how hard he works and how much he cares. And so, I think when you when you factor all those things in about what the contract is going to look like, Joe Burrow's camp is not going to take a cent less than that. And I think the sooner you get it, if you can get ahead of Burrow, I'd want to get ahead of Burrow. Let his agent say, all right, well, we want more than Herbert now, kind of thing. So they've said it's going to be private. That's usually a good sign. When you're not hearing anything in the media about how negotiations are going, that tends to be a good sign. It means that both parties are trying to figure this thing out and get it squared away.
Yeah, and at this point, if Burrow gets a few million more than Herbert, I mean, who cares, right? I mean, if you're in this range right now, you are setting new standards. Jalen Hurts is the highest paid player in football right now. Whoever signs next is going to be the highest paid player in football. So it's just
I think the one thing, Chris, that's going to be interesting to me is, does it look more like, because look, Jalen's going to get another bite at this, at 29. Like that's the incredible thing about that contract is the way they built. It's a 5-year deal. So he's going to be 29 years old when he gets the next shot at it. And it's like, man, you're going to get another shot. So I bring it up because I'm interested to see, is this going to look like a Patrick Mahomes deal? Hey, man, we want to give you a 10-year deal worth $500 million, or is it going to be let's give you 265, 280, whatever it is, and I'm interested to see what his camp wants. Would they rather have? Because that's what people forget. It's not the player; it's the agent that wants to puff their chest out and show these college prospects and show, Caleb and Drake May and these guys, hey, look what I got. Come sign with me when you get into the draft. So that's what you have to remember is it's not necessarily what Justin wants. It's what the Justin Herbert team wants. And the team is the agent that wants to hang their hat on something special. Do they want a bigger number than Patrick Mahomes got overall, or do they want a very similar to what we're seeing, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, that deal with just a little bit of more money?
And, hey, we've seen it different, right? We've seen Kirk Cousins bet on himself year after year after year with one-year deals and make a ton of money and then signing a boatload of money with the Minnesota Vikings and doing that again, right? We saw Dak Prescott bet on himself, and obviously those situations are different. Justin's going to get either a 5-year deal or a 10-year deal, right? That's what it is. But
we hope. Right.
Yeah, we hope. But I go back to that 2020 draft money, and I very clearly remember, all right, Tua and Herbert are in that conversation. We know that the Chargers need a quarterback, but we were talking about Jeff Okudah, who just got traded to the Falcons. We were talking about Isaiah Simmons. I remember watching Isaiah Simmons work out here in Costa Mesa.
He's a freak.
Like, this guy would be – could you imagine him and Derwin on the field together?
Right.
It'd be unbelievable.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, man, I'd take him at 6 and grab Hurts in the second round. Be totally fine with that. And then, look, Isaiah's really struggled. Got a lot better, 2 years ago, had kind of a little bit of a breakout year, played a little bit better last year. But you just never know. It's so hard to project. You said about, Okudah. He's like, this is one of the best corner prospects we've seen since Jalen Ramsey. And now he's gone, for a late-round pick. And now, that's not ability, that's health. The guy's played like 20 games, I think, in 3 years. So that's part of it. And sometimes it's tough to see that guy around the building. You got guys out there laying it on the line, game in and game out, getting their heads kicked in. And you see a dude that's playing 5-6 games a year. It can be kind of uncomfortable for both sides, for the individual that feels like he's letting his team down, and for the other guys that are getting the crap kicked out of them and seeing this guy just kind of hanging out riding a stationary bike. So that's a big part of it. Not saying that Jeff Okudah is a bust yet. I think it's just one of those where that tends to happen. When you have a player that is perennially injured, it is very uncomfortable for both sides to have him constantly around the facility, especially when he's making that much money as that high of a draft pick.
Yeah, and it's also, I think, lessons, too. When you pick in the top 5, top 6, if you have an inkling that there's a guy there that can change your franchise, you take that guy over the corner or over the linebacker, right? Yeah. In the Chargers and Tom Telesco.
That's why there's going to be it's why they're going to be those quarterbacks taken, Chris, right?
Yeah, you know what's weird, though? Like, I've heard this from, I think it was Schefter, and I think maybe Rappaport talked about this, too, is that the Texans may not take a quarterback at 2, and then that leaves the Cardinals – who don't need a quarterback, because of the Kyler Murray situation and the money they have invested in him. And they may not take a quarterback. And who knows if anybody leapfrogs the Colts at 4 who do need a quarterback. So that's where 2 and 3 get interesting. I know, listen, we've talked about so many different guys because the Chargers pick at 21, and we're probably going to be way off. Like, they're going to probably select somebody that we've seldom talked about. Probably. It's our luck, right? I hope not, because last year we were big on the wide receivers and some other positions.
2 years ago we talked about Slater. 2 years ago we said, man, if somehow,
we were on that
some way, Rashawn Slater slips, and sure enough, that happened.
Yeah, that felt right.
The interesting, and I want to give, I think it's our colleague, I think it's DJ that was the first one I heard bring this up, and it's pretty easy to connect the dots. If in fact Brock Purdy's the guy, and they feel like he's going to end up being their quarterback moving forward, yeah, you traded a ton to get Trey Lance, but whatever. You found your quarterback. If you feel like Brock Purdy is that quarterback and he took you to the championship game and won a bunch of games, won out after becoming the starter at the end of the year, who cares? Who cares what draft capital you gave away, and you move on. You found your quarterback. Doesn't matter where you found him. Connecting Trey Lance to Houston is interesting. If you've got that number 3 pick or that number 2 pick, maybe you trade with the Colts if they're real smitten with C.J. Stroud, and you say, hey, why don't you just give us your 2? You don't have to give us a lot. We'll trade back 2 spots. Give us your 2 and a 5, and they can slide back to 4 and grab another one of the Tyree Wilson or one of those guys, and then they can trade 12 or 13, whatever that is, to the 49ers for Trey Lance. And D'Amico knows him really well, coached him up. By all means, they say, bust his tail working. Great kid, incredibly skilled.
Yeah, Slowick is there too, the OC.
Yeah, so to me that makes sense. If you're the Texans and you're like, hey, look, we got a lot of holes. We wanted Bryce Young. That's who we wanted, and if he's not there, we're just as comfortable picking up a couple extra picks, taking a dominant defensive player in this draft, and for D'Amico, who's a defensive coach, and I don't even know if you'd have to give up 12. You might be able to give up a couple 2s or something for him. I don't know, but it's an interesting theory or bit of speculation.
Will Anderson slam dunk it too, right? I mean, I feel like that's like, okay, turn the card in, and then if you have a plan at quarterback, another destination. You talk about Rand Carthon in Tennessee, who came from San Francisco, who was involved in that process of drafting Trey Lance. Maybe they're an option too, with Ryan Tannehill's time seemingly up at some point in the near future, and knowing that Tennessee needs to kind of rebuild on offense with Derrick Henry aging. So, see, what happens at the top of the draft, I think, is going to be very interesting and may eventually kind of dictate what the Chargers do at 21, because maybe one of those quarterbacks is still there on the board as we creep into the 20s. We
can only hope.
We can only hope, right? Like Will Levis, Hendon Hooker, like you hear more and more about maybe those guys, maybe
even
Levis
Anthony Richardson. You're starting to hear could that perhaps people were speculating a little, or people were sort of pushing Anthony Richardson up a little high compared to the risk involved with someone that has that few starts, that few pass attempts, that few snaps, and just how much pause that gives general managers and scouts when you have that small of a sample. And it goes back to Mitch Trubisky, and Trey Lance did not have a lot of games under his belt, and it just makes guys nervous. That was the Bill Parcells thing. He wanted 4-year starters. He wanted guys that had played at, I think his number was 40. I want to say it was, or maybe, I think, for some reason I feel like it was 40. He wanted 40 college starts from his guys before he was comfortable drafting them, or 30 or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're talking about 13. Guy. Yeah, you're talking about 13. Mark Sanchez was that way.
I was just going to bring that up. Remember the Pete Carroll press conference where he wasn't thrilled that Mark was doing that?
Well, it was selfish of Pete. It was not. Your job as a coach in college is not to win football games. Believe it or not, you're supposed to get your guys ready to go to the NFL. That's your ultimate responsibility, is to take care of these young men. And so for Pete to do that to Mark in what was a celebratory day, because he put his name in the search, and they came back and said, you're going to be a top 10 pick, and you go. When you can start being paid to play football, especially that much money, you go play football for money. It's different now with NIL, but back then, you want an end from University of Washington, spearing you in the back with his helmet for free. And that was all just Pete knowing he wasn't quite ready for the transition because he just assumed Mark was going to be back for another year. But to the point, beyond that, an aside here in Southern California where we're doing the pod, he probably wasn't ready. But they had that circumstance. That's the thing about the NFL. And it's unlike any other sport where circumstance, it's not like baseball, it's not like hockey, it's not like basketball, where if you are in exceptional talent, your talent's going to break through. You're going to shine in the batter's box or on the pitching mound. You're going to shine on the ice. You're going to shine as a basketball player. Football is different. It's scheme dependent. It's teammates. It's coaches. It's front office's willingness to spend money to build around you. What does that offensive line look like in front of you? Are they willing to invest in the offensive line? Are they going to re-sign guys after they develop, or is it a cheap franchise that just lets guys go and they don't care and they replace? Like, that's the difference. Is so much of this is dependent on where you land. I mean, just think about Justin, and now I'm talking way too much.
No, but I know what you're talking like with when he was at Oregon. Right, and we didn't. Well, we didn't.
Mario Cristobal was a ridiculous system they had him running.
Yeah,
like that guy would have been the first pick in the draft.
The offense here too, and that's a nice segue into Kellen Moore and what Kellen Moore will bring to this offense, and maybe it's the perfect marriage between Justin and Kellen and the way he likes to play, and really the guys. We've seen Mike and Keenan maximize their talent really in any scheme. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what this offensive line looks like, to see what the running game looks like under Kellen Moore. And, we've talked about the running back. I promised myself we're not talking about the running back today. All right, if Bijan Robinson's there at 21, I think the Chargers should take him. I don't think he's going to be there, right? When I see Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 and I see Bijan Robinson at number 3, it's like, okay, why would you?
And that's everyone.
That's
everyone. Everybody's big board has Bijan in the top 5. But it goes back to, and we've already discussed it. I don't have to, reconstruct it, but I am kind of proud that we talked about it a long time ago, and now people are starting to have that same position where they're sharing money. It's money. Why would you pay a running back $7-8 million a year because you took them in the top 10 when you sign a free agent and it's $12 million a year? You want to pay the defensive end that. You want to pay the left tackle that. You want to pay the quarterback that. The money gap isn't large enough for it to be of value, and that's a big part of what you do in the draft is take premium positions in the first round so you can lock that salary in for the next 5 years and not have to worry about these gargantuan salaries. The point I was going to make with Herbert and Kellen Moore is, and this is not because he's not here anymore and was fired, but his best year was with Shane. His rookie season, when you think about the way he played, the explosive plays, the amount of quarterback-designed runs that were effective, that was his best season. I know his second year was great. Statistically, he was off the charts, and it was a great year. And they barely missed the playoffs because they lost a game in Week 18. But just for my naked eye, the Shane Steichen coordinated offense was better for him.
And it was immediate. It was immediate.
And it was just explosive. That's the thing. It was explosive. And, a big part of that could have been just the way that Joe wanted to use Austin Eckler a little bit differently and how much more of a prominent role he gained with Lombardi taking over. So I think it goes back to circumstance. It's the plays that Joe Lombardi wanted to call. It was effective. It was a top 5 offense. It worked. But I think if you were to ask Charger fans and football people, what offense looked better for Justin? It was Shane's. It was Shane's, and that's why he's a head coach now, and that's why Jalen Hurts just got a $259 million deal and was runner-up in the MVP race. A big part of that was Shane. Yeah. And so to bring – and I say that because, look, it may be construed as a shot at Brandon for bringing in Joe Lombardi in the first place instead of just keeping Shane and saying, hey, what you had going was great. Let's just roll. It's not what I'm getting at. When you're a head coach, you want to surround yourself with people you're comfortable with, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. What I'm going to do is credit him for cutting him loose, because essentially what you're doing is you're pointing the finger at yourself. Hey, I messed this up. I've got to get a new coordinator. I brought a guy in that did not work. I need to fix it, and I'll credit him for that. It's essentially quitting. Nobody ever gets credit for quitting things, but you quit when you realize this is going nowhere. Why am I still doing this? I need to quit. If you're in a dead-end job and you don't see any upward mobility, just quit. Start something new. And that's what is happening this year on offense, is they realized, okay, it was great 2 years ago, regressed last year. We have issues with the 4-minute drill. We're losing games late because we can't control the clock as much as we want to. Let's move on.
And frankly, you say all that. Joe's not a bad coach. Joe's been around for a long time, and he had a great year. I mean, they were top 5 offense the year before. The running game and speed of wide receiver obviously kind of hindered his ability to call certain plays. But you're right, it wasn't working. But Joe found a job in Denver with Sean Payton.
Immediately.
And that's what, he's comfortable with Sean. Sean's calling the plays, and that's a marriage that works. I do credit Brandon for bringing in Kellen Moore and saying, hey, we got to be better offensively, because they do have to be better offensively. Hey, I wanted to run this thing by you too. So Bill Barnwell did these trades, these hypothetical trades, and I bring it up because we've talked about the wide receiver position a lot and staying put versus trading up and what have you. So I'm just going to read this and get your thoughts. LA General Manager Tom Telesco almost always stays put in the opening round of the draft, but that's not an option here. The Chargers are at the beginning of a group of teams that expect to look for wide receivers, but any of those can move ahead of LA to make a trade with the Bucs or Seahawks. In this case, the Chargers would be moving ahead of the Packers at number 15, so they would move up to number 14. The Packers drafting a wide receiver in the first round still seems to be a theory as opposed to something that may actually happen, but this would be a way for the Chargers to land Jaxon Smith-Njigba as the long-term replacement for Keenan Allen. A more speedy option could be in play, although the Chargers could probably stay put and grab Zay Flowers or Jalen Hyatt. So we haven't talked much about Smith-Njigba, and I do think he is kind of the consensus number one. I think we have to put everything in its proper context. The cap hit for Keenan and Mike is gigantic in 2024. So that leads me to believe one of them isn't going to be on the roster in a year. Right. Maybe both, but probably one. If this is the Keenan Allen, let's say, replacement after this next year, is that something that you would be comfortable with, or do you want to kind of go all in, stand put, stay pat, and get a wide receiver with speed to complement those two guys as opposed to look to the future?
It's interesting. I don't envision it happening, just because as good as Smith-Njigba is, and he's good. When he was on the field with Olave and Garrett Wilson, he was the best receiver 2 years ago. That's how good he is. However, I think there's some concern about the injuries, about missing almost an entire season with a hamstring. That's a bit of a red flag for me. The Ohio State offense, it produces gargantuan numbers for wide receivers. And look, Olave and Garrett Wilson were both exceptional last year. So
you're great.
I don't think it's fair to stick that, but I think it's important to remember this offense puts up monster numbers for wide receivers. But he is special, no doubt about it. I think for me, that's 7 spots. To go from 21 to 14, that's going to cost you. It's going to probably cost you. It might cost you your 2, because I don't have the Jimmy Johnson chart in front of me. I don't know what the points are, but if I were to guess, it's a minimum of a 3 and maybe a 2, and they just can't afford to do that. They need those picks. I would much rather trade back. Our conversation with Renner about depth and what you might be able to get when you move back, with Brett last week when we were talking about what's available if you move back. And to me, the gap between what Smith-Njigba and what Zay Flowers, who could be there at 21, or Jordan Addison at 21. Jordan Addison's Keenan Allen as well. He's not as big, he's not as strong and as thick, but in terms of route running, in terms of separation, Keenan's greatest attribute, one, he's one of the smartest receivers in the league, but two, is he operates at one speed. When people talk about route running, I think fans don't quite understand. Yes, people can run routes. Yeah, or is it as crisp? Are your breaks as clean? What is Keenan's secret sauce is everything's the exact same speed. So you have no idea. He doesn't slow down. He doesn't explode out of his breaks. It's uncanny. It's unlike anybody else in the league where he is just operating at one speed. Calvin Ridley is like this too, where everything, except he's a little bit of a better athlete than Keenan, and everything is just, you don't know where he's going because it's all the same speed. So that's what Smith-Njigba's capable of doing, and that's what makes him very special. But he's not explosive like a Zay Flowers is explosive, and Jordan Addison is like Keenan and like Smith-Njigba in that way, and he just found himself in a Lincoln Riley offense that doesn't feature anyone. Lincoln he will spread it all out, and it does not matter. You're going to get your targets if you're open. I have no interest in getting a Biletnikoff winner because I'm going to feature you because you're a really good receiver. No, it's just going to go where it goes. So when you go back 2 years and watch Jordan Addison, though, that's what I would say to people that are down on him. And let's not forget who his coach was, too, by the way, at Pitt, and who recruited him to Pitt. Chris Beatty. Yeah. So there's a connection there. So I cannot imagine Tom being in that room, having Beatty sitting there and go, Addison's probably going to fall in our laps, and we're going to have to give up a 2 to go up and get Smith-Njigba. What do you think? I'm sure Beatty be like, dude, just sit here for Addison. He is good. You are fine. So love Bill. He does great work at ESPN, but could not disagree with him more.
Well, you know what? In Bill's defense, I think this is just a thought-provoking exercise. Sure. I think he did this with all the teams, right? With potential trades and trade-ups. Gotcha. So he's doing that to spark interest.
Yeah.
And
which one makes sense? I got you. Yeah, which one of these makes sense?
Exactly. There's some intrigue there, but I think if you do stand pat, Zay Flowers or Jordan Addison would be a perfect number 2 in this offense, regardless what happens in 2024.
Let's not forget about Josh Palmer. He fits that Keenan. He fits that Keenan role more than he does an outside. Yeah. He can excel there, and he's gotten better every year. So I'm just more comfortable with, let's get an explosive guy on the outside. And if you have to move on from Keenan next year, I hope you don't. I hope there's a way you can figure that out, and he stays healthy for 17 games, and you make a Super Bowl run, and it's like, you know what? Yeah, we're comfortable giving him a few more years. Let's do it. That's ideal for me. And
I feel good about Zay. Like, ever since you said it a couple of weeks ago, the Zay Flowers hype for me has been increasing, and it seems to make a lot of sense, right? It just seems to make a lot of sense.
Watch the tape, man. It's crazy how explosive that guy is.
Yeah, and the tight end position, whether it's Kincaid or Mayer, I'm looking at DJ's top 50. You look at the guys who are kind of in that territory, and Addison's there, Zay Flowers is there. Those are the two. I think Michael Mayer's number 21 on his big board. Kincaid is 9, right? So like the value you would get with a Dalton Kincaid if he happened to be there at 21 would be spectacular.
Right. It's funny though, Chris. And this is what we were getting at with Brett last week. Is it's also important to think about positions. So, and this is what makes the draft so hard. Is you also have to look at the position groups from a depth standpoint. Who's going to be there when we pick? Okay, here we're sitting, and I'm staring at Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, both Mayer and Kincaid are there. I'm trying to think of what McDonald is there at edge. You've got Cansey there. What cornerback? Maybe Moore is there at cornerback. Banks is there. Now you have to look at, all right, what's available in the second round? The way that guys like DJ are describing this tight end group is that it's the deepest tight end group they have ever seen. Yep. That if Kincaid and Mayer aren't in this draft, Darnell Washington and either Musgrave
25 on DJ's big board,
right, or Laporta, those guys are going to go in the first round. But it's just because it's so now I think you have to ask yourself, okay, if we take Zay because he's here at 21, what are the chances of us getting Musgrave, or Laporta with our second-round pick, probably pretty good. If we take Kincaid here, what are the chances of us getting a wide receiver that fits what we would maybe get from Zay? Maybe you don't get that full package, but do we get enough out of the wide receiver we take in the second? Okay. Are we going to find a defensive end like McDonald, or are we going to find a corner like Branch if we wait? Probably not. So let's take the end here and let's get the receiver. See what I mean? So that's the sort of stuff that starts to come into play. You have what's called two boards. You have a horizontal, you have a vertical. Your vertical, whatever, most teams have 150. It's just one through, like you said, whatever DJ has. This player's at 9, this player's at 15, and if you're a best team available, you're like, all right, we're picking a 21. There's our guy that's got the number 8 next to him. We'll take him. So the horizontal is now you've got all these grades, and it's run by positions. So now you're looking at these horizontal categories of, okay, here's my Zay Flowers. He's I don't even want to get into the way these scouts do the scoring system. When I hear DJ and Lance talk about it, I'm like, what the hell are you guys talking about? 6'9", No, I've got him as a 6'8". I've got him at a 6'7", and he's a 6'9", so I would totally take it. I don't know how the scouts do it, but that's the way. So just imagine you've got 3 wide receivers that on a 1 to 10 scale, you've got them at 9s, and now I've got 6 of them that are 8s. And I've got 5 of them that are 7s. And you're like, dude, I can get this 7 in the 3rd round, but I got to spend a first on a 9, and the gap I have between them is pretty damn close. That's what I'm getting at. So to me, a lot of that is going to come into play because of how deep these positions of need are for the Chargers. Running back, if you want to talk about Bijan, we talked about that with Brett, with Roschon potentially being like someone like that, or Tank, or one of those guys, and then the Charbonnet. That's what you now have to start balancing out. Who's here? What's that position group that look like when we get to here and here?
I want to run another scenario by you. Let's take a quick break. We'll do it on the other side. All right, guys, as the official hospitality provider of the NFL, On Location offers unrivaled access to experience all premier NFL events like never before. On Location brings you up close for all the action, providing fans with unforgettable moments from Draft Day to Super Bowl Sunday and everything in between. On Location, thrilled to announce its new partnership with the Pro Football Hall of Fame. This August, kick off football season in Canton, Ohio, and be there live to witness the class of 2023 enshrinement. The NFL is headed back to London and Germany for the 2023 NFL International Games. On Location official packages will feature game tickets, deluxe hotel accommodations, private tours, pregame hospitality, end-to-end planning, and much more. Be sure to secure your priority access today. Visit NFLOnLocation.com or search NFL On Location today. Your football experience of a lifetime awaits, only with On Location. So, Money, to that point, let's just say at 21, Zay Flowers is there, and they really want Zay. They select Zay, but that's when I think it gets really interesting because there may be a couple of those tight ends available, or a corner, or an edge that they have really highly graded. Yeah. I think at that point, that's when maybe you think about trading up, right? Get right. Your guy in the first round, and then say, hey, this is a heck of an opportunity to get this guy that we have a huge grade on that still is on the board. Let's trade our second and a third next year to move up to, whatever it is, right? To secure a guy that may be available. Because at 21, right now you have no idea what's going to happen. I know that Tom probably has a pretty good idea of where, and I remember Tom talking about when they drafted Slater. They had a pretty good idea that nobody was going to select him and they didn't have to move up. I remember saying, shoot, move up to get Slater. Tom knew what he was doing. So Tom will probably have a pretty good read on the board. You get the guy you want at 21. There could be a guy that you say, hey, let's move back into the first round. I remember they did it with Kenneth Murray a few years ago. Maybe there's a guy that they have eyes on defense, or a tight end, or another wide receiver. But securing your guy at 21 without having to trade up, I think, is probably the move.
So it's interesting. As you bring that up, now I'll present you with the counter to that.
Okay.
So for me, it goes. We had. I think we did this about a month ago. We talked about the construction of the roster and how you look at rosters around the league. And when you look at teams that have healthy roster construction, you're going to see a lot of rookie contracts. You don't want to see a lot of veteran contracts. And right now, the Chargers are one of the heaviest veteran-laden rosters. They need more guys on rookie deals. So now you get rid of that third. For the most part, 2s and 3s should be starters. If you're doing a good job, your 2s and your 3s are starters on your team, maybe as soon as their first year. They can get in there, and they can contribute. So now I've pulled up Renner's top 10s over at PFF, right? So instead of taking Zay Flowers, who's fallen to you in the first round at 21, you love him. He's great. He fits exactly what you want. You trade back. Now somebody else wants to come up and get him. They want, and now your receiver options, Tank Dell could be available for you in the second round. We talked about A.T. Perry with Brett, just great speed out of Wake Forest. He could be available for you in the third round. So now that's what your wide receivers look like instead of Zay Flowers. Jalen Hyatt, it's a one-trick pony. It's really kind of a one-game spotlight against Alabama and what he and Hooker did to the Crimson Tide in that game. But he's probably going to be available in the second when you pick, I would guess. So they're not Zay Flowers, but now you go to your tight ends. Okay, so we missed out on Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer, but Sam Laporta could be there in the second. Luke Musgrave. Darnell Washington might be available in the second. Even Tucker Kraft, that's like one of DJ's favorite guys. He's probably going to be available in the third. And like I said, when you have this deep of a class, these guys get pushed down, and now you're talking about an edge defender, Tui Tuipulotu, out of SC is probably going to be available. So now you got 2 2s and your 3, and maybe you even trade back your 3, and you get another, you get somebody else's 3 that's further back in the third, and you pick up a 5 now, and now you can stack some picks and start to build some depth. What I'm getting at is in those two position groups, as we discussed last week with Brett Coleman, is I think it was Brett that we talked about it with, but there isn't really that elite guy, that Garrett Wilson, that Jamar Chase, but it's a deep group. You feel really good. So on that horizontal board that the Chargers have, maybe the grade between Zay Flowers and A.T. Perry, or the grade between Zay and Tank Dell or Jalen Hyatt isn't that far. Mm-hmm. And they're like, you know what? We can probably just get out of here and feel like we're going to get a guy that's comparable talent. So
and Justin Herbert throwing him the ball may be the difference, right?
100%, right? We've said that. Justin makes okay receivers good. He makes good receivers great. He makes great receivers all pros. So
from a fan perspective, when you look at the draft, it's very easy to just look at the short term and look at, okay, how is this guy going to contribute this year, right? But
it's a great point.
The front office is thinking long term, man, long term. Obviously, they want contributors out of this rookie class, but it's not just about 2023. Especially when you look at the cap numbers with a lot of these players, and you look at edge getting older. You look at really there's not a long-term tight end on this roster, so they could go in a variety of directions. Keeping in line with the wide receiver theme, Jalen Guyton is back, and we've talked about adding speed. And I think the one thing about Jalen Money is you never want to see an injury like that. At least it happened in September. And, the hope is that, once training camp comes in July, that Jalen is hopefully close to his former self. He's still a young guy. All that said, they still need speed, but it was nice to see them bring in Jalen, because I remember there was a lot of games down the stretch in 2021, I believe. I remember Cincinnati, the Giants game, where Jalen came up huge. And again, it goes to the point of, Justin was finding T. Billy and all these guys his rookie year, and Guyton. And Jalen is a nice addition to this wide receiver room.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason not to sign him, for what the money is. And you developed him. There's certainly chemistry between he and Herbert. I think it's 4 catches of 50-plus or more, of 50-plus yards. Giants, the pitch and catch on the Giants game is the greatest touchdown throw I've ever seen. Yeah. So there's something there. So why not? And that's just value. That's value. That's the second wave of free agency and value. And there's still value out there. I'm still, when it comes to the edge, and I'm sure they've had conversations, but I know how much he loves them. And I'm still holding out. Maybe Leonard Floyd and Brandon Staley are still having conversations of, come on, can we get you on like an incentive-laden deal and then put you back in the market next year? And one of those things. So that's a way you can develop your depth at your edge position. Then you don't have to focus on that as much. Guyton coming back, like you said, the ACL injury happened in September. You'd hope he's ready to go by the start of the season. And at least that gives you some element of speed. You hope he has a full recovery and it comes back. It seems like these days that an ACL is like it sounds stupid, but, it's like a sprained ankle compared to what it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a security blanket there of we've got a guy with speed. We've got a guy that we know can make explosive plays. We just got to make sure he's healthy. And maybe now we don't need to freak out as much about overdrafting for that particular skill set. But you brought it up, and I think it was a great point. I do want to just acknowledge it, Chris, and that is a big thing you'll hear Tom Telesco say a lot. We're not drafting these guys for 2023. We're drafting them to be Chargers for their career. Yeah. So maybe he can get on the field this year. Maybe we think he needs a year of development, but after that, he's got potential to be a Pro Bowler. And that's the way you've got to approach this. You draft for 2023 and you end up stumbling over yourself and you make way too many mistakes because you're overdrafting guys for one particular season, and then you're hoping that their skills translate to the NFL, which is a gigantic jump from what they were experiencing in college.
I think a good way to look at last year's rookie class for guys who didn't get on the field or who had flashes but got hurt, like Tito Ogbonnia, Isaiah Spiller, JT Woods, those are three guys that I think can help this team this year that didn't help the team last year. Tito Ogbonnia did until he got hurt. But those are three guys that, again, they were drafted to be Chargers, not to be Chargers in 2022. So for as exciting as the 2023 draft is going to be, think about the guys that they selected last year who didn't contribute because there were other guys in front of them or needed some time to fully develop. This is a big off season for guys like JT Woods and Isaiah Spiller and Tito Ogbonnia.
Woods is the big one. They drafted him with eyes on him being a starter, and it's just a hard position. High safety, you've got to be able to read the whole field. You've got to know everything. You've got to take angles. You've got to diagnose. You've got to decide, am I moving forward? Am I moving backwards? It's a lot to take in. We know he's got the tracking skills. He's got the ball skills. Needs to be a better tackler. That was an issue when he was at Baylor, and you know how slight he is, so you hope in the offseason an opportunity to put on a bunch of weight. Because, look, a lot of times when you're going into the combine and you're someone like that, you want to run that lightning fast 40 so you're not putting on that weight. And it takes a second for you to catch up. So I'm hoping he bulks up a little bit to help with his tackling. But that's to me, Woods is a big one. Just because no more Nas. Aloe was great, but he doesn't have that same explosiveness that someone like JT Woods has at that high safety position. And on top of that, if you can play those two guys, not just Aloe and Derwin as your safeties, but you can play both Aloe and JT up top, well, now you can cut Derwin loose and make him whatever you want. You talk about him being that dollar or that money linebacker, the star as a corner, an edge rusher, and just send him firing off an end repeatedly in games because he's able to do all that. And when you have those two safeties up there, you're able to do that and just play Kendricks as your one linebacker, Derwin out there, those two guys up high, your two corners, and now you can really get after it.
A couple quick notes before we get out of here from Brandon Staley's presser. It seems like same comments as far as Austin Eckler is concerned. No new updates on that front. The punt returner, kick returner comment I thought was interesting. It seems like maybe that guy's not on the roster yet, and they need to identify that in the spring and the summer. And J.C. Jackson, really no new updates on him. He's just rehabbing. So I think his availability remains a little bit of a mystery as we head into the offseason and eventually into training camp. Anything else that Staley said that stood out to you, Money?
I don't think so. You just talked about, one of the things, you already addressed the Kellen Moore thing. I think his comments about Kellen and how they went and got him, I think it echoes what we've talked about here. One of the great things about Brandon Staley as a head coach is he lets the offensive coordinator do what the offensive coordinator wants to do. He does not meddle. The go forward on fourth down, the downs and stuff like that, yeah, that's a head coach's responsibility. Yeah. But it certainly sounded like Kellen's really good at this. We're looking forward to him doing what he wants to do here, and that's always encouraging when you see that. So, he talked about Eric Kendricks, sort of echoed what he had already mentioned, I think, in the presser about why same with Tom, about why they went and got him and replaced Drew with him. So, you kind of had those comments about how you get the sense that, yeah, he's going to be probably going to, I think, take the green dot if he's able to get everything squared away through training camp and is comfortable with the defense. It sounds like they want him to be that guy on defense, just because that allows Derwin to cut loose a little bit. I think for people asking, well, why isn't Derwin that guy? I think it's because Derwin can do so many different things, and there's so many different ways you can deploy him, and he may see something, just the way he operates.
Let him think free.
Yeah, it makes more sense to have that on someone else. So that's sort of one of the things I took away as well. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. There were some short answers in there. Felt like there was like, yeah, I don't want to talk about Herbert. Not going to talk about his contract. Not going to talk about Austin. There was a lot of that in there as well.
Final thing. Hopefully you see a lot of you guys next Thursday. Money, you and Adrian are hosting this thing. It's going to be, listen, the Chargers don't select till 21. That means it's more of a party night from 1 to 20, right?
It's going to be a long night. Yeah, Petros and I are going to do the radio show there from 3 to 5. And then we'll start the party. Adrian and I will start the party at 5 when the draft gets underway and the Panthers are on the clock. And it sounds like there's going to be quite a few people out there that are going to be made available to us. So have an opportunity, hopefully, to hear from Derwin, to hear from Justin, to hear from a handful of other players. And certainly Charger legends going to be out there. They do that every year as well. So we're going to have a lot of fun. And look, the West Side tends to get neglected because it can be a bit of a pain to navigate. However, when you're stuck there, I shouldn't say stuck, but when you know you're going to camp out there from 5 until about, 8, 9 o'clock maybe, well, what the heck? Just come on over and hang out. It seems like it's going to be a nice backdrop, the atrium there at the Century City, Westfield.
Century City, yeah. The Chargers have done a great job with the draft, man. Like I was in Vegas last year and got to interview Zion, but you were hosting that draft party at SoFi, which was incredible. It looked incredible. I remember being at the pier with you in Santa Monica. That scene was crazy. I remember that was the year they picked Tillery, so it was like 29 overall.
28.
So, 28. So, I mean, we were waiting all night, but it didn't matter. Like, guys were coming on stage and getting the crowd hyped up. It was a lot of fun. So I expect no different on Thursday.
No doubt. And look, there's still a ton of teams. You've got the Raiders that are picking at 7, I think. So that's going to be of interest. You've got a lot of AFC teams up there, the Texans, the Colts, all those teams that we're going to be paying attention to. They're going to be drafting quarterbacks perhaps. So there's still a lot of excitement over what's going on as opposed to just waiting for number 20.
Oh, for sure, because it's all going to affect what the Chargers do.
100%.
So
100%.
All right, can't wait for it. Buddy, always appreciate you, brother. We will see you guys next week, hopefully in Century City. For Money, I'm Chris. This has been Chargers Weekly. All right, guys, as the official hospitality provider of the NFL, On Location offers unrivaled access to experience all premier NFL events like never before. On Location brings you up close for all the action, providing fans with unforgettable moments from Draft Day to Super Bowl Sunday and everything in between. On Location, thrilled to announce its new partnership with the Pro Football Hall of Fame. This August, kick off football season in Canton, Ohio, and be there live to witness the class of 2023 enshrinement. The NFL is headed back to London and Germany for the 2023 NFL International Games. On Location official packages will feature game tickets, deluxe hotel accommodations, private tours, pregame hospitality, end-to-end planning, and much more. Be sure to secure your priority access today. Visit NFLOnLocation.com or search NFL On Location today. Your football experience of a lifetime awaits, only with On Location.